apart from my abysmal GPA, one of the other reasons why I find it very hard to go to university is because I've heard that the student experience is a bit like shit, right? Oftentimes, people who end up in university don't really get the full range of education that they signed up for. And not just this, but they have to pay an extremely high amount of money, right? And this isn't just the case in places like Singapore, but especially in places like America, where people are like locked in student debt due to the amount, just from the sheer amount of money that they have to pay just for the little bit of certificate that they get in the end. What we think is the problem in today's debate is that there is an incredibly low requirement for entry for a lot of these schools, and they oftentimes are incredibly financially focused. What this means is that students who just don't meet things like, for example, like the language barrier that allows them to probably work, like study in these schools effectively, are admitted into these schools due to the sheer fact that these individuals now have like an incredible amount of money to pay. The problem with this is that they then take this money and they don't shift it and make like the bulk of the money improve student welfare, but instead are directly funding researchers who have like little to no impact on the students themselves, right? Our policy is going to be really simple. We're going to shift funding from just funneling it all to research to improve their like points and have them be the best universities in the world, and instead shift it to student-facing things, right? So what this looks like is junior faculties and teaching assistants and improving the quality of these individuals by hiring better individuals who probably understand how to teach rather than just like are really big experts in their field, right? But not just this, right? We also think that we probably should improve the facilities of a lot of these universities as well. And obviously this has to like vary from university to university, but we think that for the vast majority of universities in the world, at the point in which they start up, things like, for example, SIM and SUSS, like the crappy universities in Singapore, they then all just force themselves down to like try to produce as many research papers in order to climb the rankings and sell themselves like prostitutes. I don't think that this is really, really good. I have two main substantives with like sub-tiers all integrated. Firstly, on how we improve the student experience and why this is really, really good for people. Secondly, why how are we going to handle research and like why exactly is it worth the trade-off? No, thank you. Firstly, I think I have to set out a few premises as to how we're going to improve the student experience. We have to realize that just because these people are excellent researchers and are experts in their field does not mean that their teaching is good. Why is this important? Because we have to realize that oftentimes schools conflate these two things for one another and place these individuals in charge of entire rooms of like 40 to 50 to even 100 students that they just have no ability to teach. This is where you get weird murmuring professors who stare at the board and you can barely hear them, and it's pin drop silent because everyone is asleep, right? Presumably, what this means is that individuals who go to these schools don't go to it for the educational quality that they can attain, but simply for the branding, right? So they go to places like, for example, Stanford, or for example, Harvard, not targeted at anyone, by the way, just because these universities are considered extremely prestigious, and at the point in which they do get the university certificate, they then presumably have a higher chance to get a job. But we have to realize that like companies across the world are smartening up to this. They realize that that's just not the case, because oftentimes random people that come from like NUS, sometimes, not all the time, are just incompetent and like just don't have the kind of skills that is required to fulfill the requirement of the job. No, thank you. What this then means is that you see a massive shift of things to like other random like universities and other online degrees that individuals then take. And this becomes detrimental for these universities, right? Because what we want to do instead is we want to shift the metric of how we rank these universities and how we allocate these things to improve the overall situation, create a skills-focused university experience for these individuals. What this then leads to is better employability and a better student lifestyle there, because it improves the overall quality of teaching and the way in which they absorb and use this information that they then learn in university. We think that this is really, really good for two different reasons. Firstly, we think that these university students have an overall better experience and are able to fully experience things like university life and campus life, and these things are presumably a happy time for them. And they're not just there to like sweat their asses off and mark because their teachers aren't teaching them anything. But secondly, this is also really, really important for employability, because we get a better and we get a better equipped workforce. What this means is that you don't just like go for the highest, go for the best course just so that you can possibly make it to the job that you want just on the certificate alone, but these individuals will actually have real skills that are applicable to their dreams and the jobs that they do want to perform in the future. We think that this is really, really good for the workforce, because what it does is that it creates a better ability for like employers to discern who is suitable for these jobs and how exactly do we want to decide who gets into these jobs. I'll take opening.
Do you think research will be an integral part of student life, be it in the corporate world or academia?
What?
Do you think research will be an integral part of student life?
Aha, that's the second part of my substantive. Aha, okay, so secondly, on research and how exactly it's handled, right? And we think that while, yes, research is likely to be impacted in some manner, we think that it's likely to be negligible or minor at best, right? Why do we say this? Because we have to realize that at the point in which these individuals no longer get the funding for research, what happens then is that A, we can get things like, for example, governmental bodies to then fund these research things like based on how they want. And you have to realize that this doesn't mean that the university loses all agency as to how they decide or what they get to research. But B, if the government just doesn't want to pump money into them, we think that private corporations are also going to be more than happy to pump money into these institutions so that these guys can like pump out good good products and shit, right? But we have to realize, right, even if it does impact innovation on a pretty large degree, we think that employability and welfare is just more important, right? Because we have to trace what exactly is the purpose of a university and how it got to this bloody like research-centered university nonsense, right? Because we have to realize that the university rankings in today's day and age is oftentimes determined by how much research papers you can pump out. And when you put a cap on the ability of universities to do this, right, you then get universities that are able to actually educate their individual, which is the original purpose of these universities to begin with, right? We have to realize that universities, while presently are nexuses of things like research and development, we think that they can also be these things, but not just this, can also serve as incredibly important areas and incredibly important milestones for students to then achieve higher education and actually be relevant in the workforce and actually do things like attain the job of their dreams and try to be a contributive member of society. Because of all these reasons, opening government.
The government believes that research and good education are mutually exclusive when this is not the case. We refute that universities should only increase the employability of students. We believe that being good researchers is a very important part of a university education. So both sides agree that the money that the students give to the universities should benefit the students. And I'm going to elaborate on how this research, how the funding of the research actually benefit the students. Hence, as it benefits the students should pay for that research. A significant amount of their fees should go into that research because research is an important part of university education. First of all, when the people who are doing research, they teach you research and good education are not mutually exclusive. You can have people who are good researchers and be good educationists. That's because these researchers actually present their research to common people, and explaining this research to common people is way more difficult than explaining it to, say, second-year undergrads who have done some amount of work in that field. And hence they are not just good researchers, they are also they can also be good educationists. They could also be good teachers. And And what we want university education to? We want the university education to not just teach abstract biology to the student. We want the university education to teach that student how to behave in certain creative way, how to go through that mind process that will lead for creative ideas to solve cancer and make life better. And that could mainly be taught by the professor who is probably working on cancer. For example, when I was taught linear algebra in high school, I thought it was crappy and abstract. I didn't understand it mainly. Please wait. I do not understood it. But when I was in NTU taught linear algebra by a professor who is actually using linear algebra to do quantum computing, I was more enthusiastic. I was being taught better. And I actually knew how this thing is being applied in quantum computing and how they work and how can I develop a creative mindset to use these mathematical tools to make quantum computers and make the world a better place. And yes.
But notice that if we could have researchers who are excellent teachers, we would have them as well. The problem is the researchers that just aren't.
I do understand that there are certain researchers who could be crappy teachers, but you need to understand that most of the researchers are actually good educationists, because when you do a research, even if a significant proportion of school fees goes to the researchers' pockets, they still will need a good amount of funding from the government or private institutions. And to get that funding and to convince the public and the university in general that this is a good research to point your money to, they explain their research to common people who may have very less background in their respective fields. And hence they can be good teachers also, even though there are some who may not be good teachers. And hence students are directly benefited from this research because they know how to be creative, they know how to do research. And secondly, I would like to talk about humanities research has significantly takes less funding than STEM research. So you're essentially discriminating between these two kinds of students. These two kinds of students, because then if you restrict the amount of fees that goes to research, humanities research will progress, whereas STEM research won't progress. Both of those are paying the same tuition fee mostly. Mostly people in STEM and humanities, most of the time, the tuition fee is usually independent of course. There is a little bitching, but usually if they're paying the same tuition fee, why should they not get benefited from the research? Yes?
If we're deciding whether to spend money on students or on research, if research is the most effective way of helping students, wouldn't that come under helping students rather than specific research funding? Therefore, the clash in this debate is whether we should spend money on research to the exclusion of students' educational benefit.
We need to understand that research is an integral part of university education. Jose will explain more on that point. So, to summarize, the students should pay for that research because they are getting benefited from that. They are getting benefited from that research. Even though certain facilities might be degraded, even though certain aspects of student life, say maybe a recreational facility in the university or maybe a festival, and if we look at but what do the students actually want? If in the current world we look at which universities do students choose? A university that has more research. As a physics student, I would choose a university that has more research. There are professors that are teaching me that are doing more research than a university that is more focused on teaching and less than on research. I would focus on that university. And now, hence, the students themselves want the research to happen. And now if you rebuttal like this, said in the United States, students are under debt. They have to pay a lot of loans. It is to be understood that there is financial aid for those students. There is financial aid for students who are not able to, whose family background is poor, who are not able to pay their tuition fee. There is there is financial aid for students. And secondly, for the language barrier, that people with a lot of money but language barrier enter America, people cannot just go to a specific university with a language barrier. If I go to Japan on MEXT scholarship, I have to learn Japanese for 1 year, and then I can study in Tokyo. And if I go to US or UK, I have to take the IELTS or the TOEFL test to prove that I am proficient in English. Then I can go to study here. It needs to be understood. And also, generally, the language of academia in many countries is going to be English. So there should be no talk about the language barrier. To summarize, research actually benefits the students themselves. That's why there should be a significant portion of the fees that funds research, and these researchers are also going to be good teachers. Even if there's a small minority that is not, the overall benefits are greater than the harm, and I have never been prouder to oppose.
Frankly speaking, much of higher education feels like a shell game at this moment. The university traffics in its own brand and sells it to students, and from the money, proceed to invest that into the sort of research that boosts their rankings so that more students come in desiring to partake of that brand, which they can wave in front of employers. At the core of all this, at the end of all this, none of these students come up with useful knowledge, with skills, with employability, and frankly speaking, it's just the case that lots of universities graduates leave after 4 years of university having drunk a lot more alcohol, but not actually gotten any more intelligent. I guess we drink a lot of alcohol, we tend not to get any more intelligent, but you know, okay, so what I want to talk about is two things. One, I want to talk about recentering the student experience at universities as something that is central. And secondly, I want to talk about how best to fund research. Because I also think that the incentives that universities have regards to research now are broken, and it is better if the funding stream from this research doesn't come directly from student fees. Okay, so before that, some rebuttal. The central claim of opening opposition is that students gain value from this research by either directly by participating in it or indirectly because they associate with professors that do good research. They don't really substantiate the other claim. But recognize that the first claim about them gaining value from doing research in classes misunderstands this research and what we're talking about. To the extent to which participation in research is part of the class, note two things. One, it is not true that the vast majority of undergraduates do this. I.e., as an undergraduate, you're probably going to 1, 2, or 3 level seminars and lectures and so on and so forth. You're not partaking in a research that is actually what pays your professor, and it's not actually what gets him kept on the payroll of the university. If to the extent to which that is true of postgraduate students or undergrad students in their final year, then that is part of your education. Which is to say, it is easy for universities to then say, well, if their participation in this research as part of an attachment to a professor is their course, is their class, then it is legitimate for us to spend their student fee on that research because it's part of their course. We don't think this is the bulk of the research or the bulk of the diversion of funds that comes from student fees to the sort of research that universities engage in. This research is research at a postdoctoral level, research that doesn't involve undergraduate students or a vast majority of postgraduate students. So I don't actually think that a vast majority of students benefit directly the way that they describe. But secondly, it's weird that they add to this by saying, well, this means that you end up discriminating against STEM research because it costs more. And the fact that STEM research costs more doesn't change. But what I do suggest is in status quo, what is happening is, in effect, students who is, to the extent to which students pay relatively similar fees, what happens is that students are paying, students who subsidize research that is less expensive are cross-subsidizing research that is more expensive, which seems unfair. Like, I don't think this is a big harm on their part, it's probably just kind of minor, but it's weird that they suggested it is, in fact, the opposite. Finally, what I do think is, even if students gain some benefit from research, like this, the way in which they get a shine of associating a prof who's involved in some really high-level research, I think it's just outweighed massively by the diminishments in student experience that I don't think they really engage with. What Weighted tells you is, in status quo, where the revenue stream for what matters to rectors and the people who make decisions at universities is the stuff that feeds into rankings, is how many citations you've got and how many papers you can put out a day, because that's the KPI that these rankings track, and that's the KPIs the media focuses on. Then it becomes a chase to do this, which means that you are less likely to have the funding to allocate to hire more TAs or give TAs and adjunct professors the time they have to teach as opposed to write papers. In other words, if as an adjunct professor, you know that your continued existence depends on the fact that you can churn out more papers, then you can't spend time focusing on how best to prepare your lecture slides for your students. Which means that even if you don't buy the analysis that Weighting gives you on how the skills are quite separate, and notice it's quite obvious that they are separate, which is to say, explaining something to a layman seems quite different from explaining something to specialists who already have a large shared corpus of knowledge within the same field as you. So obviously the skills required to make your paper understandable to fellow specialists and to undergrad students are quite different. Even if you don't buy that, the time prioritization simply means that these academics, to the extent to which their payroll comes, like that universities can take the funding that pays these academics and put it into research, will always face incentives to do more research rather than teach students. Now, in a world where universities had this constraint and they couldn't spend this money on research, then they would be forced by this policy to spend this money on professors who weren't pushed to publish papers, who would in fact focus on the student experience. That makes the student experience a lot better, because in terms of things like universities no longer having to chase international students or having incentives to, obviously they have proficiency tests, but they have incentives to disregard or lower the bar for proficiency tests, because each additional international student you bring in is like a huge amount of money you can plow into the research that is going to boost your university's rankings. Or in terms of how universities are likely to lower admission standards, because again, each student you bring in is more money for the funding that funds you and your institution, so less likely to be able to do all of these things, which means the student experience is massively improved. When you are in class with other students and other classmates who you know meet the reasonable level of like intelligence or have prepared enough to actually engage in a reasonable discussion in class, as opposed to universities where you know that this person actually just can't keep up but has been brought in because they're willing to pay that tuition fee. That means the student experience is massively improved on our side, yes.
So you agree that the passion of most professors actually is in the research rather than the teaching, right?
I absolutely agree, but that is true not because it is inherent to the professor, but it is true because they have been instructed to do so, and if they fail to do so, they will lose their job. And the reason why they can do so is because the university is allowed to spend money on asking them to do research rather than asking them to focus on teaching. That's the problem that we solve. But why do we think research in general ought not come from these students, and in fact ought to be controlled by other sources of funding? Because the big question that has not been asked by all yet, surprisingly, is how do we get research at universities in the first place? Well, we think two alternatives happen, and we can into this in this speech. The first, presumably, is either companies will now partner with with universities to do like directed projects, or that the state will partner with universities to do directed projects. We think this is superior than current research for two reasons. The first reason is companies and the state are likely to have very clear notions of what they want out of the research. They're likely to demand that the research meets certain KPIs or goals, as opposed to the incentives of the university, which is merely to publish papers and like get as much of the citation count as possible, rather than thinking about whether that research actually benefits society or firm in any meaningful way. We think a lot of the research that comes out of universities now is just meaningless and is aimed to target rankings rather than real outcomes. The second thing is that it means that these companies and the state are likely to have a firmer grasp on the intellectual property that comes out of this research. So they're more likely to care about that and make that useful rather than universities now, which are often exploitative of students who end up having to give up their IP and so on and so forth. We think it's clearer in a world where the IP assigns firmly to a company or the state. Very, very proud to propose.
is predicated on like the amount of research you can churn out, further research that you can churn out. Because it was really true, the end goal of universities to ensure that their students can enter the corporate world, that their students are employed world. Then surely regularly will reflect that. We propose the reason why it is so, because the end goal of universities is to allow for their students to become better academics, better researchers, because that's what they want our students, that's what they want our students. And we agree how we regret the fact that in status quo that there's a high linkage or high it's like your ability to do research, your ability to do academics is tied to your ability to evaluate the corporate world, which is the reason why people want to enter the university to get a job. But you think the end goal and purpose of university education shouldn't be because it allows for these people to get a job, but because these people are better researchers. And that's a point that we put first, that they didn't quite approach. So before that, I just want to look at started by their claim that they will improve the student experience. Because their claim was that the reason why we have poor educators or poor teachers is because like some researchers are not very good at educating their students and therefore like they are just bad teachers. But the truth is that if they are also having research and if they are or the KPI of the school is still based on the amount of research that they can produce, then these teachers will still exist in their system because that's what the school has to do anyway. They will churn out research. So I'm unsure how they improve the teachers under their paradigm. Because the type of researchers that they want to build out system will still exist under their paradigm. But more importantly, you're also afraid that because of the existing status quo, whereby if you participate in the research, that IP is in doubt. We think there can be formal systems to ensure that we have a better clarification of who deserves the IP right, who deserves the intellectual property right. So it's not something that is innate in their system. But more importantly, their sites equally exploitative because they force students to rely on the corporate world. Because when you say that it's clear that the corporate world gets the IP right, it's only because that they are forced to do so, without which there will be no funding for the type of research they want to do. So it's equally exploitative because they force students to become the corporate world to be able to do research. So we think it's probably better than our system because we ensure that school have a formal way of granting IP rights to both both the teachers and the students. We think that's comparatively better. But more importantly, let's enter into a plan. Because I think the confusion between or rather, like what the problem is that there are some one students to be employable and therefore they think that should be the end goal towards, but that's how we allocate that's how we should allocate funding. We disagree at its core. We don't think that's what university education should be for. We think the large part of what your university education should be geared towards is ensuring that you are able to push the frontiers of your field, be it the sciences, be it the humanities, being able to discover new reasons as to why certain economic systems are successful failing, or reasons why certain certain cultures are acting the way they do, or even like the sciences, certain cure for cancer, or certain discovery of black holes or like fundamental particles. We think ultimately the end goal of university education and the end goal or the reason why this university even exists is because we recognize that only in a world whereby in a world in which you don't act on a corporate incentive or on an inclusive incentive, because what you want to do is to find out more about the world and rather for the sake of earning money is where you can truly get the most innovative ideas, because you dare to ask the questions even if the questions don't earn you money or even the questions are questions that society doesn't want you the question is society doesn't want them to answer. I think that's how you come out with new ideas, that's how you come out with ideas that push the frontiers. But we think that can only happen when you have individuals who are also doing those type of research. Because if you're not involved in the research, even if you have some knowledge of physics, like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, because you've been doing physics, be it experimental, be it in the corporate world, the fact of the matter is that you're not chasing those new ideas anymore. You're not trying to you're not trying to rethink your view of the world. I think therefore you're likely to be able to push your students in a new direction in a way that allows them to be able to think of better ideas. I think only when your professor is currently doing active research in the new frontier and you can ask and understand from him like, oh look, this is actually a new way of looking at like chemicals, this is a new way of looking at society, this is one which you can then also be inspired as well. But very important, yes.
Yes, research is important. Why should students be forced to fund it? Because basically every university forces students to pay tons for research. And why should these students be forced to spend time, fritter away time on things like black holes when they're trying to, I don't know, pay?
Because we think that should be a choice that you make. That you enter university because you want to do research, not because you want to enter university because you want to do a job. We think, sure, that's what you want out of the university, but the university is not obliged to return in kind. So if you want a university that allow you to get a job, that actually have good teaching experience, you go to those universities. But we think at its core, like universities should be about research because we think that's ultimately matter. We think people will have employment should go up in other areas. So what's the trade-off that they have to do? What's the trade-off that they have to have? Because they rather you want to say that they will have same more researchers because they will have corporate grants and they will have grants from governments. We think first and foremost, as I talked about in my speech earlier, that those grants are problematic because they often rely on what the government wants, what the corporate world wants. But more importantly, even if it doesn't, the very fact that you have a KPI, you have a goal to look to, and then your funding can be cut if your goal doesn't match, means that students will be less visible. Because that means the value of research becomes lesser. Because it means that at a point you should force research based on a KPI. That means that it becomes objective driven. That means that you're no longer trying to think of new you're no longer trying to test the water, you're no longer trying to think of innovative methods, even if it's the most obscure. Because we think the value of research is in the fact that you can find that you can find new ways of solving old problems. I think that's valuable because it's often the most unexplored approach that could perhaps give you new inspirations that result in newer avenues or newer solutions. So in conclusion, I just want to say that on the side of position, that we think universities will gear towards research. Because we think that's ultimately the only place we can have that quality research that ensures that it push our understanding of the world, not just the physical world, but our understanding of cultures and religions. And that can only happen when we have a system that's geared towards that. We think the systems come from schools, come from universities, and not from the corporate world, not from the university. For all these reasons, the approach works.
Yeah, we agree that research is a critical part of making the world a better place. However, the way we get sustainable research in the future is to invest and to generate the current generation of undergraduates. And thus, we need to correct for universities being short-termist in terms of focusing on the present as opposed to the future. We're going to follow two main points of extension. Firstly, that we get better research closing the link for opening government and explaining why alternate funding and the incentives in university administration that result from this are more important. Secondly, that accessibility of college across different subjects will improve on our side. But before that, some rebuttal. They said, we only care about employability. That's not true. We care about people learning actual skills, which can be used for research in the future. And you're less likely to learn actual skills if your professor is unclear and doesn't give a shit about teaching the class, because his promotion is based on the amount of research that he can churn out. The problem is that students choose universities for maximum prestige, which means highest ranking in today's world. And therefore, this means that they choose universities that spend less on the students themselves. Doing this, the perverse incentive created by a wall in which the ability of someone to get employed is tied to how well the university does research. It makes no sense. And this answers the point about why you can't just go to another university that provides a more teaching-oriented focus, because universities that are entirely teaching-oriented don't have any rankings or don't have good rankings at all. The problem is, in order to be reputable and to create employment, you have to splurge in research. So there's a disjunct and there's a complete separation here between what universities are intended to be for students and what they actually are. Then they said, undergrads need to learn research, and this is an important part of the learning process. We don't necessarily disagree with that, even though we think that it's a bit idealistic to think that it's the only thing that universities should care about. But on our side, we think that as As pointed out in the UI, we actually get more funding for undergraduate research assistants and so on if we can market it as part of the undergrad education and part of undergrad experience. In fact, we encourage professors to include undergraduates in the research process when they otherwise would have been excluded, because this allows them to market it to their faculties and to the department chairs as part of the formal education. So we actually create an incentive for professors to include undergrads in their research, even if they get in the way and they cause the research to be slightly slower. It doesn't really matter because rankings are not as competitive anymore if all universities are cash-strapped to the same extent in terms of the type of research that they do. So we think that we actually create the type of undergraduate experience that they want. But before, so the first one is extension about better research. So OG touched on this briefly, but we think there's a deeper point. The point is that there's actually a short-term bias in universities investing in research, in research as opposed to investing in undergrads. If research is important, then so is the next generation of academics, but no individual university has the incentive to invest in the next generation of academics. Why is that the case? Because the problem is that universities don't care about the academic competency of current students or their ability to become professors in the future. They have no systemic reason to care. Firstly, because these people only contribute meaningfully to their field 20 to 30 years in the future. A PhD itself takes 7 years, and after that, groundbreaking innovations take another 10 years to come into effect. So universities who want to climb up the rankings now have no incentive to make sure that the undergrads are competent. But secondly, the benefits are diffuse. The undergrad is highly unlikely to become a professor at your own university. In fact, universities have an opposite incentive, not to hire their own graduates back as PhD candidates, because this is seen as academically incestuous. The consequence of this means that universities have very little incentive to care about whether or not their undergrads are able to do research or not, or able to contribute meaningfully in the future or not. And we think that, on balance, investing in the undergrad experience actually helps to mitigate this to a far larger degree on the comparative. In the long term, even if this results in less research right now, we will create a generation of individuals more interested in the sciences or the humanities, and therefore more able to contribute to their fields in the future. Obviously, we are not going to overplay here and say that will result in a drastically better world, but what we're saying is that at least the quality of education for people going into academia 20 to 30 years from now will be better. Yes?
The root of our problem is with the rankings. Don't you think reform rankings becomes a better solution?
Sure. Firstly, I will explain how you would reform the rankings to make this better. Secondly, we'll point out that undergrad experience is incredibly more subjective and it can't be ranked in an objective way as opposed to the number of citations per faculty or something like that. So on the comparative, we think that universities will still rely on these objective measures because they just make more sense than subjective measures like surveys of undergraduate experience. It's not clear at all why you have the ability to change these rankings and why universities will accept them, even if they are changed. Anyway, so we think that we changed the future, like the prospects of the future generation of academics. But moreover, we think that secondly, we changed funding from a guaranteed to a conditional source. Thus, the need for clear deadlines and social impact is more important. OG touched on this very briefly, but they didn't explain how the funding process within university departments currently works. Currently, the answer is that academics can generally work on whatever they want. If you have a good relationship with your department chair and have a good reputation, you can get funding almost without accountability. Even if departments care about their research rankings, etc., these are likely based on citations per paper, and if you're already well established and have a high H index or something, it doesn't really matter what precisely you research. Therefore, even though academic independence is good, we think that there needs to be more accountability and more key performance indicators. And on the comparative, if your choice of funding is things like NSF grants or corporate sponsors, universities will structure research programs and the type of people they hire to be in fields which are more likely to attract such donations, and therefore research that is more ultimately useful or it has more practical application, however you measure it. So the main idea is that we reduce the drastic lack of accountability that people have to spend large sums of university money with impunity, and we think this is incredibly important because there's no other accountability checking on reputed professors on the comparative on their side. So we think that we produce better research overall by changing the incentives of current faculty as opposed to creating a better generation of future faculty for universities. But secondly, on the accessibility of college across different subjects, I think I sort of got it wrong by saying that this is unfair to STEM students who pay the same fees as humanities students. Because on the whole, universities still spend a lot more on STEM subjects than humanities and social sciences, for the reason that often these are the subjects that propel them up in rankings. It's just, for some reason, it's an intrinsic trait of the academic world that like STEM papers get more citations per paper, and like humanities and social sciences papers are often take longer to publish and get less citations per paper, maybe because the academic communities in these subjects are not as large. The consequence of this is that universities care disproportionately more about funding departments in STEM as opposed to departments in the humanities and social sciences. So on the whole, they get a lot more funding, and I think this is empirically true of all universities except those that explicitly brand themselves as universities of social sciences or humanities. So we think that in principle, it's not right that an English student is misled by the #2 ranking of a university and chooses to go there thinking they will have a high quality of education. But only like 5% of the fees that they pay actually go back towards their education in this subject. There's no reason to spend, universities right now see no reason to spend on English courses because humanities research is worth less in terms of the total citations. So what we create on our side is a system where these funds will be distributed slightly more equitably, because universities have no intrinsic reason to dislike these humanities majors outside of the rankings and the research and this fails. If the total amount of money you can spend on research is capped, then they have a reason to spread these funds more equitably to give students a better experience, because that is like a second order priority for them right now. So what are the whole this results in? It's not only lower class fees, but fees that are spent more equitably, and more students actually get return on the investment and more return on what they pay for in terms of education. We reduce the ability of universities to shortchange students in such what is frankly quite an immoral way that exploits the gullibility of people with respect to university rankings. We are proud to stand in closing government.
The reason why I always struggle with this debate was because they were never quite able to deal with the main idea coming out from downstairs talking about being able to people with skills. So this is where we stand. So I'm a law student. Just 2 weeks ago, a Supreme Court judgment came out, and as a result, I have to throw out two years worth of loans and a textbook. The thing is this: I don't blame my faculty. I don't blame my faculty. They're all excellent teachers. But by the time I actually do get to the workforce, most of the things you actually learn in school are going to be obsolete regardless of how good the teacher that you were when you were teaching. This is important. This is why it's particularly important that we make sure that at a minimum level, your faculty and perhaps your students get involved in research at the highest level possible towards so as to make sure that these people remain relevant when they actually to enter the workforce. So as to make sure the skills they have actually do matter. I think, right? So let's be clear, right? We completely agree with a lot of problems that we do really have some of the problems that the government brought up, right? If the problem is with rankings, then just change rankings. If the problem is with students not being involved in research, then maybe we start involving them in research. It's not like universities don't understand or how by sticking to their usual ways of research, they are slowly being obsolete as well. But the thing they never quite explain, none of them ever quite explain, is why you have to go off your way to restrict the autonomy by which the universities actually do determine the market, determine how they're going to go about engaging their students. I'll talk about four things. One, the increasing need for undergraduate students to be involved in research and why it's important that they get universities to fund research as much as they want to. Two, let's talk about the importance of the autonomy to determine the importance of school autonomy to determine the market. Three, let's talk about the impact that this policy has on the actual teaching pool available to universities. And four, let me explain why alternative funding is bad. So, firstly, what is the need for students to be involved in research? The example I gave in the beginning of my speech was just one small example. The truth is, right, increasingly, the rate at which, right, existing technologies, existing skills, existing conventional knowledge get voided, get made completely obsolete by any random new development is getting faster than ever. So this is important because it means, right, that no matter they're focusing on teaching, they're simply focusing on teaching students and not getting them personally involved within the getting involved in research, getting them involved in research, or at least getting the faculties to keep themselves updated to the highest level. Is the one thing that guarantees that students that do go into the workforce are going out there with outdated skills. Closing government tried to be very convenient about this. They say that you cut funding, that means maybe a bit slower, but then some accountability here and there, right? Notice a few things. One, they never quite explain why other methods of maintaining accountability don't exist. I think most universities still have to answer to their customers or the other people that pay them anyway. But two, notice that there has to be a trade-off on the end, because notice that the point at which you actually do the point you actually do force like schools to significantly cut the amount of funding they have for research. It means one, less amount of money available per student. Two, it means less amount of money available to actually keep up to date. Three, it also means less chances for people to hire students as research assistants, or to even like continue paying for subscriptions to like the most important the best scientific journals, medical journals, legal journals, whatsoever. Which means therefore the rate at which students become the rate at which students find themselves getting obsolete by the time they actually reach society is one that's actually very high if you simply stick to like just focusing on the teaching instead of getting them actively involved. And that is why we think it's particularly important on our side, right, that we actually keep funding as much, we allow schools to fund research as much as they want, so that they can at least equip students with the best skills. Secondly, let's talk about school autonomy to determine the market, right? So opening government's problem was schools don't really know how to teach. Schools hire people who don't really know how to teach, then therefore students suffer, then people not happy, right? Firstly, I think you should, firstly notice how there are plenty of students who actually pick the universities because they want to be involved in the research to begin with. Secondly, notice that, right, that the word of like schools having poor teachers or not being able to teach at least to get up eventually. That is how and that is why, right, there are plenty of schools with high rankings that don't actually have that much uptake. It's also why there are plenty of schools that also already choose not to care so much about rankings, even though it might mean seemingly less prestige. So the thing that is that if you care about like just having a good teacher and being able to go to a good class, there are actually schools for you to do that. You can actually make the choice for yourself. I don't really see why you have to force this thing down the throats of every single school. But Coen,
if the skills you learn are no longer relevant because the market is changing, doesn't that apply to the research output of your university as well, given that past research is what is taught in classes to undergraduates?
Yes, but one, you can actually build on past research and compare. And two, it's particularly important that you keep funding research just so that people actually are able to consistently keep themselves updated. Thirdly, what exactly happens to the teaching, right? So I asked Yuan just now why people do want to get involved in teaching university to begin with. His answer was, people care about research only because it's actually because of the money, right? We don't necessarily agree. There are plenty of people. Professors, PhDs, who are actually involved in the highest level, not just simply because of the money, but because it is their ultimate passion. If it's really money you care about, there are plenty of available job opportunities outside. They'll probably pay far more, but people just continue to do this anyway because they think they actually want to get involved with like the highest level of teaching. This is important because once you start cutting funding from research, it then means that the amount of money you have available for like research is goes down, and therefore means less research opportunities available for your professors. This is particularly bad because there are plenty of good professors out there who actually do want who can teach, who choose therefore not to take up positions at universities because they think that they won't be able to get as much of the research they want done as they were before. But lastly, let's talk about why alternative funding is bad. Because they all say either government funding or private entities funding, right? No, government bad because they have limited amounts of money and only care about what's necessary. Private funding is bad because people only care about making sure it translates into a product that they can listen to a profit. Making sure schools can independently fund their profit is important because it then means one, they are free, two, and two, they actually create the most of their development. For all these reasons, go with closing opposition.
Three things. One, responses to the op extension. Two, talking about the student experience. Three, talking about research. First, on the opposition extension. The first claim that they forward is that you need research involvement for the undergrads to know about the changing situations of the world. Firstly, this is mostly unviable just because of the way the disciplines work. That is, most undergrads are not good enough to engage with the research that is being done in any meaningful way. Secondly, you're teaching the results of past research as well, as Arthur points out in a POI. Thirdly, it's not a useful skill for most people, for instance, in the workforce, to be able to update by learning how to update in a research way. That is, research is a lot more obscure and esoteric and not useful for people to deal with changing conditions of the world. Maybe the legal research stuff is one exception to this, but in terms of, I don't know, maths and science, but also in terms of very obscure bits of the humanities, I'm not sure any of this is actually useful to people. Fourthly, in terms of proportions of money, I'm not sure why you need tons of research going on to get most of the benefits of undergrads being involved in research. I think with a much smaller proportion, notice that these proportions are right now are very, very large. With a smaller proportion, you can still get a lot of the research benefits of education. But fifthly, notice that you can do hiring or people as RAs, and you can account that as part of education, not as part of research. So professors are much more likely to hire undergrads as RAs or to help them, because it's now for the undergrads education rather than because it's for research. If they wanted to maximize in research, they would hire postdocs instead, because postdocs are just much more competent than undergrads because they have much more experience in doing this. The second thing they say is in terms of autonomy, which is basically like a choice argument. They're people can choose to go to the university that they want. As Arthur points out, this is not actually free, because if you want a job after leaving university, you need to go to a university that has high rankings. And if you want to go to a university that has high rankings, that university has to be spending way too much money on research, because that's the way the ranking system works right now. Third thing they claim is that people are researchers and teachers because they want to research. These people are generally not good teachers. The only proposition link they gave is that they are good at explaining things to lay people because they should explain things to lay people in order to get research funding and money. This is empirically false. If you ever ask, I don't know, a good pure mathematician to explain things to lay people, they are basically unable to do this. But also, the skills that you need to explain things to people who have never studied something are very different from the skills that you need to explain things to people who want a little bit of technical explanation at least, but are not researchers in the field right now. You can only give basic generalities. Those don't really help. But again, we think we should be hiring educators. We think there are tons of great educators who are put off academia because they are forced to do tons of research they do not want to do, they don't think means so we actually get better education. Final thing that they advance is that private funding is bad because it's profit driven. Notice that you have tons of private philanthropy that helps with research. Hundreds of billions of dollars is actually important to non-profit driven research. But also we think that if you're actually just researching things that will help people's lives, that will, produce new drugs that help people, or help energy-wise, I think that's generally a good thing. They're basically talking about accountable research. That's also a good thing under our side. Okay, on the student experience first. Opening up and saying you spend more money on students, and they currently don't do this because of ranking, so you get more TAs and adjunct professors, and also researchers are sometimes bad teaching. But notice that opposition have a good response to this, which is that students choose which university they go to. In response to my POI, they say we can choose a more teaching-oriented university. So the fact that we chose not to go to a teaching-oriented university means that we actually care about research. The problem that Arthur points out with this is that if you want to go to university to have a job, rather than to do research, which is a particularly rosy picture from opening opposition, and I think 99% of students, if not more, want to go to university in order to get a job, you need to go to a prestigious university. That means that there's a sort of collective action problem happening here, which is that all the students go to prestigious universities to get their jobs, but none of these universities have to spend more on the student experience. Spend more on helping the students get the jobs that they went to the university for in the first place, because their rankings and their very prestige depends on them spending a ton of money on research. This is a collective action problem that's only broken at the point when you stop it. When they say that you can reform rankings, firstly, the world exists right now. I'm not clear how you can change it, especially because there are tons of independent ranking done by the news media. Secondly, the undergrad experience is terribly subjective, as opposed to counting how many citations that people have got, and therefore it's much harder to measure how good an undergrad experience is, except for this very empirical citation rating. But thirdly, notice that a POI to CG is pretty late as a time for a counterprop. On research, finally, why is research funding much better under our side of the house? Arthur makes two claims. The first claim is that we structure research programs in a much better way. Opening opposition saying it can be that there's less value because it's beholden to donors, and it can be cut. But on the other hand, the fact that it can be cut means that it's an accountable program, and therefore we can have a much better research program under our side of the house because we can stop funding. Opening government say that now it's an objective-driven research program, and therefore it's better. And they can also have help with IP. I think that the IP thing, I don't know, you can probably get an IP lawyer under both sides of the house. But I think that Arthur says it's really important here is that it's not that that the funding can be cut, if the funding actually structurally can change, because the structure of university research funding is that you have professors who have tenure and you have a relatively constant number of students every year because you're a prestigious university. So basically you have the same amount of money that comes into the university and that then gets split up among the professors. So you still have about the same amount of money every year. Versus with grant funding, where you're actually forced to, I don't know, if you do not get your grant, your lab gets destroyed or gets dissolved because you do not have enough money anymore in order to keep it going. That's a type of funding that can absolutely be cut. So it's not just about funding being moved around, but it's actually about competition existing in the first place here, and actually having accountability. The second extension that we give is that we don't care, the universities don't care about the academic competence of the students right now. Why? A couple of reasons. The first reason is that the advantage they get from the academic competence of the students right now happens 20 to 30 years in the future, which in terms of actually being able to do research. That's way too long term for any university administrator. They would have long been fired or long, retired by then, which means that it doesn't actually affect their ability to do well in their jobs. Secondly, it has very diffuse benefits, because if you do your undergrad in one place, you're not going to do your PhD in that place, but you're more likely to be claimed by another university as a PhD student or as a postdoc or as a professor, and therefore these other universities are going to be getting the prestige benefits of the investment that you make into your own undergrads, which means that schools again do not have the incentive to care about those competences. Add to this, competence is very hard for employers to measure, and therefore we get a school system that doesn't really educate people in the basic skills that they need to become good researchers, which is presumably what opposition care about. The important impact of this is that in the long term, research in 20 or 30 years is going to be done by people who are undergrads right now. These undergrads right now are not going to be well equipped to be researchers, except in systems where the universities are forced to spend money on them, because universities have these structural incentives to care about the citations and papers that they get right now, rather than those that they get in the future. I'm proud to comment.
Oh, just enough time. Finish talking, can get out.
This debate that I identified, let me quickly just address CG's case and take them out of this debate, right? Mostly what they talked about, they made two main extensions. The first was that they're going to restructure research in a better way to increase accountability, but they never told us how they're going to do it, and they never said why, through private funding through universities or allocation of university budget within the university or better allocation of the budget would increase accountability, how reduction of funding would increase accountability. So we never really got that link from them. But more than that, they said universities don't really care about students' academic competencies because any benefits that they receive will be 17 to 20 to 30 years in the future, which is not true, right? Because students that go into jobs immediately after university still have an academic competency that they have to uphold. So for me, if I graduate from SMU and then I go and work at Goldman Sachs and I don't have the amount of the academic competency that I should have because SMU is a very research-oriented university, they will fire me, and that is the kind of feedback that the university will receive eventually, and that's the kind of opinion that would be formed of that university. So what they said is blatantly not true. Another thing that they tried to say, which would bring me to my first crash, so they try to make this claim that students don't really necessarily have a choice in the kind of university that they choose, because at the end of the day, they would choose university based on ranking because they go to university to get a job. And this is blatantly not true, right? Take this from someone who did university research 2 years ago when I was entering university. I gave up universities such as Yale, UCLA to stay in SMU, not because I think I wouldn't have gotten jobs from there, but because I recognized that the job market in the US wasn't good enough. So there were a lot more factors than just ranking affecting my decision to not go to another university. There are factors such as, and we don't think that students who do like research on the university they want to go to consider overall ranking rather subject-specific ranking. So we recognize that universities that are good at, for example, English, because they have a lot of like papers published within English, can not necessarily be the best for math. So when students choose universities, not only do they consider subject-specific ranking, but they also consider student experience. They consider word from their seniors. They consider like the amount of research opportunities. And to that I say, when research opportunity doesn't necessarily mean that the employability of a student reduces, because at the point at which you're able to do hands-on research, you're able to actually go out into the field and see what it's like to be able to use certain softwares or crunch certain numbers and receive like information, whatever. Like just going through research, we think that improves the quality of education that a child gets, and we think that's very important to be able to produce well-rounded, employer-friendly individuals, right? They also, OG came up and made this claim that students end up choosing universities for rankings and hence they don't get that student experience. So we're really, really keen on getting that student experience, which is not true, right? But a lot of universities that focus on research, like assign a certain amount of budget to research, which they don't necessarily have to assign to student experience to make the student experience better. If the student experience in university is shit, chances are, more often than not, it's not about the amount of money they assign to that research, assigned to that aspect of university life, as much as they just don't care about it. If you go to a university such as Harvard or Stanford, learn that your student life isn't as important as the amount of like studies you're going to have. So if you consciously choose to go to such a university where student life isn't excellent, you have to realize that in advance and you have to prepare for that kind of a thing. So we don't think that student experience is compromised because of research. It's a conscious choice that a student makes. Furthermore, right, why I came up and told you is that there's an increasing need for undergrad students to get involved. And this is obvious, right? Because you're not just learning things in theory, just like he did with his case that he spoke of, but you're actually learning how to apply them and whether they're going to be applied maybe 7 or 10 years from now. Because you don't want your jobs to become obsolete by then because the knowledge that you have runs out, right? We need to give schools the autonomy to be able to determine the market that they operate in, because they know their students best. They know what the students want. They know to what extent students and to that extent faculty want to be involved in projects. Give me a second. And so they recognize that research opportunities that they can provide for their students and for their faculty would result in better employability of the students and their faculty. Yeah.
Look, it's true that students make choices, but the central problem with this choice is the problem that is reflected across all of that bench, which is that they think that rankings or reputation reflect the quality
okay.
you see.
So no, that's not true. Yeah, I just proved to you why ranking isn't the only thing that students consider when they make a decision on what university to go to. And the reason for this is students consider various other things: the country that the university is in, the amount they have to pay, the amount of research opportunity, the employability of students or graduates from that university in the past and in the upcoming future, and just like there's so many things that students consider. It's not just rankings. That's not true. Beyond that, right, we think that passionate teachers, to a great extent, are better than teachers that are just like equipped to teach material. If you have a teacher that is like personally involved in or personally invested in the subject matter that he or she is teaching, we think that is better to spark curiosity within the student to be able to learn more and facilitate his or her own learning, right? So the next main clash I'm going to address is whether university funding is the ideal or optimum kind of funding, and if there is better funding available. So we already told you, so OG and CG both kind of talked about this, but we already told you that government can only provide limited amounts of funds for research, and the reason for this is that they will only conduct research on things that actually have a social impact. So for example, as a government, I would probably want to invest in, say, finding the vaccination of a drug or a social problem or demographic problem versus why black holes exist. But we think that to answer the question why black holes exist is also important for 2 reasons. Number one, intellectual curiosity. We think that this sort of knowledge is extremely vital for just like research to propel in that field and for us to know more about that field. Second, and more important, we think that like such research that seems obsolete now might be extremely important in the future and might be an imminent threat that we need to address that we might not have been able to without this kind of research. Second, and Yuan already told you this, right? Private funding, they kind of just focus on profits. So they wouldn't research on things that aren't profitable or things that aren't seemingly profitable that might be profitable. Which is why we think that universities are the best agents to conduct research. Because not only are they accountable for the kind of research they do and the kind of results they produce, because at the end of the day, if they produce results that kind of aren't true, they're going to be held more accountable by society, by the government, etc. They have more to lose. Plus, you have students who depend on grades because of this research. You have professors that receive their income because of this research, which is why we think that research is better done in universities. And I'm proud to oppose.